You really think you can handle this case? Judge Gregory Hart's voice boomed across the courtroom, his words dripping with contempt. The crowd fell silent, eyes darting between Lily Moore, who stood quietly at the defendant's table, and the judge, who towered over her. Lily was no lawyer, just a simple office worker in her late 20s, dressed modestly in a gray cardigan and slacks. She was here today because of a mistake at work, an accidental legal error that had somehow landed her in a courtroom facing one of the most influential judges in the city. Most people would have been shaking in their boots, but not Lily. She had faced challenges before. The judge leaned forward, clearly amused. "Do you really think you belong here?" he sneered, his eyes scanning her unremarkable appearance. The crowd murmured with disbelief. What was she doing here? How could someone like her stand up to a judge known for his sharp intellect and ruthless reputation? Lily's face remained expressionless, but inside, her mind was already working. She wasn't just a simple office worker. She had graduated top of her class from law school years ago, but she had chosen a different path, working behind the scenes, quietly helping others, far away from the glitz and glamour of the legal world. No one here knew that. To them, she was just another woman in a cardigan. Judge Hart, sensing an easy target, pressed on. "You're out of your depth, Miss Moore," he said, his voice booming with authority. "Do you even know what you're talking about?" The room held its breath, waiting for her to crumble. But Lily stood taller, the pressure only fueling her determination. She had not come here to back down. Slowly, deliberately, she stood up from her chair, her calm demeanor contrasting with the judge's growing frustration. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steady but strong. "I've studied this case in detail, and I believe there is a critical flaw in the interpretation of the law that you've just presented." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Lily? Speaking up? Against a judge? The judge's face twitched, and for the first time, a flicker of doubt crossed his expression. "Flaw?" he repeated, his voice tightening. "What flaw?" The murmurs from the gallery grew louder. This wasn't going the way they had expected. Lily took a deep breath, then began outlining her argument. She didn't rush. She spoke with the precision of someone who had spent years studying the law. The room was silent, hanging on her every word. Each point she made was backed by statute, precedent, and case law. She presented her argument with a clarity that made it impossible to ignore. As she spoke, the room seemed to shrink. All eyes were on her, and for the first time, Judge Hart looked uncertain. He glanced down at his notes, then up at Lily, then back at his notes. He was visibly rattled. This can't be right," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Lily's eyes didn't waver. She had already won. The judge knew it, the room knew it. And for the first time in his career, Gregory Hart had met his match. He opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't find the words. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily had done what no one thought possible. She had just taken down one of the most powerful figures in the courtroom with nothing more than her knowledge and determination. Judge Hart's face reddened as he scanned Lily's argument, his mind racing. He had been caught off guard, completely unprepared for her brilliance. The silence in the courtroom felt heavier now, as if the weight of his own arrogance was starting to collapse around him. For the first time in his career, he was unsure of himself, unsure of the case in front of him. The tension in the room was palpable. "You must be mistaken," he said, his voice lacking the confidence it had earlier. "There's no way this interpretation is correct." Lily didn't flinch. She had expected this. She had expected the challenge. And she was ready. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she began again, her tone calm and unwavering. "The law is clear. The precedent is established. You are misinterpreting the core principle here." She stepped forward, her words crisp and controlled, each one cutting through the room with precision. "I'm simply applying what's already been decided in the courts. You can't ignore the facts because they don't fit your desired outcome." Judge Hart's hands gripped the edges of his bench, his knuckles turning white. His mind was racing. How could he have missed this? How could a woman, someone who he had so easily dismissed, be so much more than what he had assumed? The room was still silent. The onlookers were watching intently, their eyes flicking between Lily and the judge, waiting for one of them to crack. But it was clear now, Lily was not backing down. "I understand this may be difficult to accept," Lily continued, her voice steady. "But the law doesn't bend to personal pride or bias. It stands on the principles of fairness and justice. Her words rang out, not just to the judge, but to everyone in that courtroom. The crowd was beginning to sense it. The tide had turned. Judge Hart sat back in his chair, his face pale now, as if the air had been knocked out of him. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated a simple woman, a woman who, despite her humble appearance, was now standing before him with all the power of the law on her side. The murmurs from the audience grew louder, whispers of disbelief and admiration spreading like wildfire. The judge cleared his throat, trying to regain some semblance of control, but his earlier confidence was gone. He knew it. He had been bested, and by someone he had never expected. I need a moment, he said, his voice barely audible, his authority now nothing more than a hollow echo. Lily nodded, giving him the space he needed, but she didn't feel the need to say anything more. She had already made her point. The room, once filled with doubt and ridicule, was now quiet. All eyes were on her. The silence was deafening. Judge Hart had been humiliated, and the irony of it was not lost on anyone. He had set out to tear her down, but instead, she had built herself up. He had tried to break her, but in the end, it was he who was broken. The moment stretched on, and even the gallery's whispers had stopped. Lily stood there, confident, calm, unshaken. And for the first time, Judge Hart understood something he had never considered before. Appearances could be deceiving, and true power came not from the title you held, but from the strength of your mind and character. The silence in the courtroom was suffocating. Judge Hart, still visibly shaken, cleared his throat and motioned for the proceedings to continue, but the moment had already passed. Lily had proven herself, and it was clear to everyone in the room that this wasn't just a simple mistake. She had come here today, not as a victim, but as someone who understood the very essence of the law. It wasn't just about winning a case. It was about standing up for what was right. As the judge reluctantly gave his verdict, a murmur of approval ran through the gallery. People were slowly beginning to realize that Lily wasn't just some office worker, but someone who had been underestimated by all the wrong people. Lily stood there, her expression unwavering. She wasn't celebrating her win, though. There was no need for it. The real victory was in the quiet respect she had earned from those around her. No longer was she the woman who had walked into the courtroom in her modest cardigan, dismissed by everyone. Now, she was the one who had turned the tide. As the gavel slammed down, signaling the end of the trial, Lily couldn't help but think back to her decision to leave the law firm and follow her own path. She had given up the high-powered career for something that truly mattered to her, helping others in the quietest, most impactful ways. Today, however, she realized how much that decision had shaped her into someone who could hold her ground in even the most daunting of places. The room began to empty, but Lily remained, standing still as the weight of what had just happened settled in. She hadn't just defeated a judge. She had defeated every assumption, every judgment placed upon her because of her appearance, her career choice, and her calm demeanor. As she left the courtroom, she didn't walk out in arrogance. She walked out with quiet confidence, knowing that sometimes the loudest victories are won in the silence after the storm. The next day, as Lily sat at her small desk in her office, the phone rang, cutting through the usual morning quiet. It was the last thing she expected. "Miss Moore?" The voice on the other end said, formal and unfamiliar. "This is Gregory Hart, the presiding judge from yesterday's trial." Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, Your Honor. I wanted to personally apologize," he said, his tone a sharp contrast to the arrogance he had shown in court. "I underestimated you. I didn't expect someone in your position to know so much about the law. You've proven me wrong, and for that, I owe you an apology." Lily paused, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," she said quietly, her thoughts swirling. "I appreciate your words, but my actions were about what was right, not proving anyone wrong." There was a moment of silence before Judge Hart spoke again. "I was wrong, Miss Moore. You've shown me a side of the law I didn't see before. And I believe you could do a lot more with your knowledge. You should consider returning to the legal field." Lily leaned back in her chair, reflecting on his words. It wasn't about the validation. It wasn't about being right. It was about justice. It was about standing up for what was right, even when the world didn't expect it from you. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said softly. "I'll think about it." Hanging up the phone, Lily stared out the window, lost in thought. She had chosen her own path, a path that brought fulfillment, even without the prestige of a lawyer's title. But what if this was a chance for something more? Maybe it wasn't about where she worked or the title she held. Maybe it was about the impact she could make. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. She turned to see her colleague, Tom, standing in the doorway. "You okay?" he asked, noticing the far-off look in her eyes. Lily smiled faintly. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just thinking about the future." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Any big plans?" Lily's smile widened just slightly. "Maybe," she said, the words carrying the weight of possibility. As she sat back down at her desk, she realized that no matter where life took her, she had already proven to herself that she was more than capable of standing up for what was right. No longer would she be just the quiet office worker. She had the power to change the narrative. And that was enough for now. Weeks passed, and Lily continued her work in the office, but something had shifted. The case with Judge Hart had opened her eyes to a world she had once left behind. It wasn't just about the law. It was about making a difference, standing up for what was right when no one else would. As she sat at her desk, the phone rang again. This time, it was a call from her old law school friend, Rachel. "Lily, I have an opportunity for you," Rachel said, excitement in her voice. "You remember the firm we both applied to, right? They reached out to me. They want you to join." Lily's heart skipped a beat. It had been years since she thought about returning to the legal world. "Rachel, I don't know. I've built a life here. It's simple, but it's mine," Lily replied, uncertainty creeping into her voice. Rachel chuckled softly. "I get it, but this is different. You can make real change, Lily. You've already shown you have the power to take on anyone, even the most powerful. Why not use that for good?" Lily paused, her mind racing. She had been content with her quiet life, helping others in small ways. But what if this was the chance to make a bigger impact? What if she could help people in ways she never thought possible? After a long silence, Lily finally spoke. "I'll think about it," she said, her voice steady but thoughtful. "I owe it to myself to explore this." The next day, Lily walked into the firm's sleek downtown office, feeling a rush of unfamiliar excitement. She had been here before, years ago, but it felt different now. She was different. As she sat in the conference room, the senior partner, Mr. Wilson, greeted her with a firm handshake. "Lily, we've heard a lot about you," he said, his eyes sizing her up. "Your reputation precedes you. We're impressed by what you did with that case." Lily smiled, but inside, she felt a strange sense of calm. This wasn't about impressing anyone anymore. This was about doing what she believed in. As the meeting progressed, Lily realized something. She wasn't just sitting at the table because of her legal skills. She was there because she had the courage to stand up for what was right, even when no one believed in her. That courage had gotten her this far. And no matter what path she chose next, she knew one thing for certain. She was no longer the quiet, underestimated woman she had once been. She was a force to be reckoned with. The day ended with a handshake, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just a handshake of acceptance. It was a handshake of respect. As Lily walked out of the office, the city lights glittering around her, she realized that whatever the future held, she was ready for it. She had already proven to herself that she was capable of so much more than anyone had ever imagined. Lily's first few weeks back in the legal world were a whirlwind. The firm had welcomed her with open arms, and the work was everything she remembered: challenging, fast-paced, and, most of all, impactful. But she wasn't just another associate. The respect she had earned, the quiet confidence she exuded, made her stand out. Her colleagues quickly learned that there was much more to Lily than they first assumed. She didn't have the flashy resume that most of them had, but what she had was the courage to fight for what was right, the intelligence to back it up, and the humility to never forget where she came from. One day, while preparing for a high-profile case involving a major corporation, Lily was called into a meeting with her senior partner, Mr. Wilson. He had a serious look on his face as she entered the conference room. "Lily, we need your help," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're up against a tough one here. They have more resources than we can count, but we believe we have a chance to win." Lily nodded, her mind already working. "What's the plan?" she asked, ready to dive into the details. The case was massive, an environmental lawsuit involving a chemical company that had been polluting a nearby river. It was a complex issue, and the opposition was prepared to throw everything they had at them. But Lily wasn't intimidated. She had faced giants before, and each time, she had come out on top. As the days passed, Lily threw herself into the case. She spent hours reading documents, reviewing evidence, and strategizing with her team. The challenge was enormous, but she was driven by something more than just winning. She was driven by the desire to make a real difference, to show that even the smallest voice could take on the largest corporations. The final day of the trial arrived, and Lily stood in front of the courtroom, her heart steady. She had prepared for this moment, and now it was her turn to shine. The opposing counsel, a sharp and seasoned lawyer, sneered at her from across the room. He didn't believe she had what it took to win this case. Lily knew he saw her as just another young associate, but she had learned to use that perception to her advantage. She stepped up to the podium and began her opening statement. Every word was measured, each sentence carefully crafted to leave no room for doubt. She spoke with clarity, with passion, and with a conviction that no one in the room could ignore. The case unfolded, and Lily's strategy was working. She carefully dismantled the opposition's arguments, pointing out flaws and inconsistencies with the precision of someone who had studied every detail. The jury was listening. They were with her. As the trial came to a close, Lily felt a deep sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about standing up for what was right, for the people whose voices had been ignored for too long. When the jury returned with a unanimous verdict in her favor, the courtroom erupted into applause. Lily's team surrounded her, but she didn't feel the need for the spotlight. She had done what she came to do. She had proven, once again, that strength came not from power or resources, but from integrity and the courage to speak the truth. The journey had come full circle, from the quiet office worker who had been underestimated to the powerful attorney who had just changed the lives of countless people. She had found her place, and it wasn't just in the courtroom. It was in standing up for what mattered, no matter the odds. Lily sat at her desk late one evening, staring at the legal documents spread across her table. The case she had just won was behind her, but the victory was bittersweet. She had made her mark in the legal world, but there was still something missing, something deeper. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. Lily, the firm wants you to lead a new project. They believe you have the vision to make it a success. The words hit her with a wave of mixed emotions. It was exactly what she had worked for, recognition, leadership, but it felt different now. She wasn't just seeking success for the sake of it. She wanted to make a real difference. As Lily thought about it, she realized something profound. She had been seeking validation from others for so long, but now, her goal was no longer about proving her worth. It was about using her skills to impact the world in ways that mattered. The phone buzzed again. It was Mr. Wilson, the senior partner at the firm. "Lily, we need to talk," his message read. "Could you meet tomorrow morning?" She immediately agreed. The next morning, she arrived at the firm's headquarters early, her mind buzzing with possibilities. Mr. Wilson greeted her warmly as she stepped into his office. "I've been following your progress," he said, his voice serious but respectful. "You've exceeded every expectation. That's why I want you to lead this new initiative. It's big, Lily. You'll have the resources, the team, and the full support of the firm." Lily nodded, listening intently. She had worked hard to get to this point, but now, the challenge was different. It wasn't just about winning cases. It was about building something meaningful. "I'm honored by the opportunity," she said, her voice steady. "But I want to make sure we're doing this for the right reasons. We have a responsibility to our clients, yes, but also to the communities we serve. We can't just aim for success. We have to aim for impact." Mr. Wilson smiled, clearly impressed. "That's exactly why I called you here. You're the one who gets it. You have the drive to lead this with integrity." Over the next few months, Lily immersed herself in the project. It was unlike anything she had done before. The stakes were high, and the challenges were real, but Lily was determined. She used her voice not just to argue in courtrooms, but to create positive change in the legal industry. Her team rallied behind her, drawn to her passion and vision. They worked tirelessly, creating strategies that helped those who needed it the most. As the project took shape, Lily began to see the transformation she had hoped for. It wasn't just a professional success, it was a personal one. She had found her purpose in a way she had never imagined. It wasn't about titles, accolades, or recognition. It was about the people whose lives were improved because of the work she was doing. One evening, as she left the office, Lily looked up at the skyline. The city was alive, the lights flickering in the distance. She realized that, for the first time, she was exactly where she needed to be. Not as the quiet woman who was underestimated, but as the leader who was making a real difference. Lily had settled into her new role, and the work was both challenging and rewarding. Her team had flourished under her leadership, each member contributing their unique skills to the project. It wasn't just about winning cases anymore. It was about making a difference in ways she had never thought possible before. As she walked into the office one morning, she received an unexpected message, an invitation to speak at a prestigious legal conference. The message was from one of the most respected figures in the legal world, a mentor who had once guided her during her early years in law school. "Lily, we've been following your progress," the message read. "We believe your work is setting a new standard for what lawyers can accomplish, and we would be honored to have you speak at the upcoming conference." The invitation felt surreal. To be recognized on such a large scale for the work she had done, to have her voice heard by some of the most influential legal minds in the country, it was an overwhelming thought. But it was also a challenge, a new frontier for her to conquer. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she was ready to step into the spotlight. But then, she remembered the days when she was the quiet office worker, the one who was overlooked and underestimated. She had fought hard to get to this point, and now, she had something valuable to share. She could no longer hide behind the work. It was time to step forward. That afternoon, she called Rachel, her old friend from law school, to share the news. "Rachel, I've been invited to speak at the conference," she said, a mix of excitement and nervousness in her voice. "I don't know if I'm ready for this. It feels like such a big step." Rachel laughed warmly. "Lily, you've been ready for this since you stood up to that judge. This is your time." The words hit her harder than she expected. Rachel was right. She had already proven herself in so many ways. Now, she had to trust in what she had accomplished and embrace the opportunities that were coming her way. The day of the conference arrived, and Lily found herself standing backstage, waiting for her turn to speak. The hall was packed with hundreds of lawyers, judges, and legal professionals, all there to hear the insights of the top figures in the industry. Lily's heart raced, but she remained calm. She had been in high-pressure situations before. This was no different. When her name was called, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by a sea of eyes focused on her. She took a deep breath and began speaking. Her voice was steady, each word carefully chosen, each point made with clarity and passion. She spoke about the power of integrity in the legal profession, the importance of standing up for justice, and the responsibility lawyers had to use their position to make a positive impact. As she spoke, Lily realized that she wasn't just sharing her experiences. She was inspiring others, challenging them to think differently about their work, to push past their doubts, and to aim higher. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. It wasn't just a professional achievement, it was a personal one. She had come full circle, from the quiet woman who was once underestimated to the respected leader who had the power to change the way people thought. As she left the stage, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had found her place, and it wasn't in the shadows anymore. It was in the spotlight, where she could make the biggest impact. The future was wide open, and Lily knew, without a doubt, that she was ready for whatever came next. Lily sat at her desk, reflecting on everything she had accomplished in the past few months. It had been a year since she first stepped back into the legal world, and the transformation she had undergone was nothing short of remarkable. The quiet, underestimated woman who had once walked into courtrooms unsure of her place had become a respected leader in the legal field, someone people turned to for guidance, for insight, and for strength. But even as she stood at the top of her career, she knew this wasn't the end of her journey. It was just the beginning. As she looked out the window, her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Mr. Wilson, her senior partner. "Lily, we've been approached by a new client," the message read. "They're looking for someone with your expertise. It's big, and I think you'll want to take this on." Lily's heart quickened. She had been involved in high-stakes cases before, but this one felt different. The weight of it was heavier, more significant. She didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and called him back. "Tell me more," she said. Mr. Wilson explained that the client was a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing legal representation to underprivileged communities, fighting against systemic injustice. The work they did was crucial, but they lacked the legal resources to take on the larger corporations and government entities that were standing in their way. "This is what you've been working towards, Lily," Mr. Wilson said. "This is your chance to make a real impact." Lily was silent for a moment, her mind racing. The case was challenging, but it was exactly the kind of work she had always wanted to do. She had spent years fighting in courtrooms, taking on powerful opponents, but now she would be fighting for those who had no voice. "I'm in," she said, her voice firm with determination. The next few months were a whirlwind. The case grew in complexity, with countless hours spent in research, negotiation, and strategy. But Lily was relentless. She fought not just for her clients, but for the principle of justice itself. As the case progressed, it became clear that the stakes were higher than anyone had expected. Lily and her team uncovered evidence that implicated powerful individuals who had been profiting from the very system they were fighting against. It wasn't just a case anymore. It was a battle to change the entire structure of the system. The day of the final hearing arrived, and Lily stood in the courtroom, facing the opposing counsel, who had underestimated her just as many had before. But this time, there was no uncertainty in Lily's eyes. She had come too far to back down. She was fighting for more than just a verdict. She was fighting for the future. As she delivered her closing argument, the weight of the moment settled over her. This wasn't just about winning. It was about bringing about real, lasting change. When the judge ruled in their favor, the courtroom erupted in applause. It was a victory not just for Lily, but for the countless people who would benefit from the justice they had fought for. Walking out of the courtroom that day, Lily felt an overwhelming sense of fulfillment. She had found her purpose, helping those who needed it most, standing up for what was right, and making a difference in a way that mattered. She had come a long way from the quiet office worker who had once been dismissed by everyone. Now, she was someone whose actions spoke louder than words, someone who had proven that with integrity, courage, and determination, anything was possible.